Hello, my name is Ruslan. Today I'll tell you a crazy story you won't forget.
The night I discovered my husband's secret, it wasn't lipstick on a collar or late-night texts. It was a marriage certificate with his name on it, but not mine. And the date on it was 6 years after the day we exchanged our vows. I found it in a courthouse archive by accident. I wasn't even looking for it. I'd gone there to pull property records for work. The clerk handed me the wrong folder. Inside, tucked between tax liens and zoning maps, was a single page that turned my stomach to stone. Certificate of marriage, Thomas Green and Claire Martin, witnessed and sealed. A date, a judge's signature, a neat blue ribbon. I thought it was a clerical error, a cruel coincidence. But then I saw his handwriting on the form, the slant of the G, the flourish of the T. My husband had married another woman while still married to me. At first, denial was my shield. Maybe it was fake, maybe forged. Maybe someone had stolen his name. But deep down I already knew. The late nights, the unexplained trips, the moments he'd looked at me with eyes that weren't fully present, those hadn't been nothing. They had been practiced lies. I brought the certificate home, tucked in a manila folder. I waited until he was asleep. Then I searched our house like a detective with shaky hands. I found an extra set of keys in his drawer, receipts from places we'd never been, a second phone buried under winter coats, and in the phone photos, her, Claire, smiling at him the way I once had. That was the moment the floor gave way. For weeks, I pretended nothing was wrong. I smiled, cooked dinner, kissed him goodbye. But every move he made was a thread I pulled, unraveling a second life. I followed him once, shaking in my car like a criminal. He drove 20 miles to an apartment complex I'd never seen. Walked inside. She opened the door, kissed him, closed it behind them. I sat in the dark for 3 hours, headlights off, until my fingers went numb on the steering wheel. I was married to a man who was already married. It would have been easier if it were just sex. A fling, something carnal and stupid, but what I found was worse. He had built a parallel marriage, shared bank accounts, family photos on her wall, vacations, a dog I'd never met but whose toys littered their living room. With me, he was Thomas Green, the responsible husband. With her, he was Tom Martin, the adventurous partner, and the obituary. That was the cruelest twist. When his father died, the local paper ran a tribute, survived by his loving son Tom Martin and his wife Claire. Not a word about me. According to the world, I didn't exist. I thought I would explode with rage. Instead, I froze. I let it calcify inside me, building a shell of numbness. I played the part of his wife at home, but I was already a ghost haunting the ruins of my life. But I wanted answers. So I went deeper. I pulled records, traced emails, hacked into his second phone. I mapped out his schedules. He wasn't sloppy, he was meticulous. Alternating weekends, different excuses for each life. Separate tax filings, carefully balanced. He even had spreadsheets to keep track of holidays and anniversaries, so neither wife felt forgotten. I wasn't married to a man. I was married to an illusionist. The worst part wasn't his betrayal. It was my silence. I let it stretch for months because I wanted the perfect proof, the knockout blow. I gathered bank statements, photos, transcripts. I built a case like a lawyer preparing for trial. And then one night, sitting across from him at dinner, I couldn't take it anymore. "Who was Claire?" I asked. He froze, fork halfway to his mouth, eyes wide, then narrow. "Where did you hear that name?" he asked. "In the courthouse records," I said evenly. "And in the obituary, and in the photos on your second phone." He dropped his fork. For the first time in our marriage, Thomas charming, confident Thomas looked afraid. He tried to spin it, of course, said it was complicated. That Claire had been a mistake, that I was the one he truly loved. That he'd been planning to tell me, that he needed me to understand. Understand what? That my vows were half a contract. That my marriage certificate was just one of two. I told him to leave. He begged, cried, even got angry, said I was ungrateful for all he'd done for me. Then he went silent, cold, packed a bag, walked out. The house felt bigger without him, but emptier too. Like grief and relief had decided to move in together. Claire called me 2 days later. I'll never forget her voice, shaky, but steady enough to cut. "You're his wife too, aren't you?" I almost dropped the phone. "You know about me?" "No," she said. "I just found out. We met at a cafe. Two women with the same husband. We sat across from each other, studying our reflections in each other's pain. She thought I was the mistress. I thought she was. In truth, we were both victims. Together, we compared notes, timelines, lies, trips, his entire double life spread between two lattes. She showed me her wedding band. It was almost identical to mine. He hadn't even bothered to be original. From there, everything turned into war. Lawyers, investigators, the state charging him with bigamy, fraud, tax evasion. He lost both marriages in courtrooms instead of kitchens. But the emotional wreckage, that's harder to dissolve. Claire and I built a strange bond out of shared betrayal. We text sometimes, trading bitter jokes about the ghost husband we both lost. We grieve in parallel, just like we lived in parallel. And me, I rebuilt, piece by piece, therapy, new friends. A new apartment with no yellow siding and no ghosts. But sometimes, late at night, I still wake up reaching for a man who never truly existed. A man who played me like a role. So here's my question for you. If you discovered your partner had not just cheated, but built an entire second marriage, paperwork, apartments, even a separate identity, what would hurt more? The body they shared, or the life they lived without you? And would you want revenge, or just freedom? The morning after Claire and I mapped his double life between two lattes, I woke to a new kind of quiet. Not the absence of sound, but the absence of permission. For 9 years I'd narrativized us, Thomas the flawed good man, me the patient wife, love as the plot armor. Now there was no plot, just paperwork and the problem of who I was without the role. I'd learned it by heart. The DA's office called first. A woman with a voice like a gavel explained bigamy charges in language both simple and humiliating. "We'll need statements," she said. "We'll need you to bring your marriage certificate, joint returns, lease, photos, anything that shows good faith reliance. Reliance. That's what trust is, in court. Not a feeling, an instrument." I called my mother. I expected alarm, judgment. Maybe I told you SOS she'd never actually told me. What I got was a long inhale and then, "Come home for dinner. Bring laundry. You forget to eat when you're brave." Brave? I did not feel brave. I felt like a house after a storm, upright, but the wiring suspect. Thomas texted, careful and cruel. "You're making a mistake. Lawyers feed on women like you. Tell Claire to stand down. There's context. We can talk." He sent a selfie once, red eyes, gray hoodie, performing contrition like it was a song he knew the chords to. I did not reply. Claire sent me screenshots. His appeals to her were identical, word for word except for the pet names. He had playlists for everything, dates, fights, apologies. He had a playlist for ruin and didn't know we'd learned the tune. Our first status hearing was on a Thursday that smelled like wet paper. Thomas arrived with a suit that thought it still had authority. His lawyer, a man whose hairline had retreated from ethics long ago, argued that there was no intent. Complicated emotional dependency, he said. Unique family arrangement. The judge tilted his head the way owls do before they decide if something is prey. When it was my turn, I stood, palms damp, throat tight, and told the unglamorous truth. I said we had a mortgage I can't afford alone. I said our families bought one set of Christmas presents each year, not two. I said we once fought for a week about whether the good towels were allowed to be used for guests and how now the word guest sits differently in my mouth. I watched the stenographer as she captured my life in consonants and realized that survival is partly about who gets to write. After, in the corridor, Thomas cornered me by the vending machines. "You're not this person," he said, too soft. "You don't destroy people." "I don't," I said. "You do." He smiled. God help me. He smiled and the old charisma flashed like a reflex. You love me because I make life big, he said. Don't punish me for being who I am. I'm not, I said. I'm punishing you for making me small. He flinched, then stepped closer, lowered his voice. Claire will never understand me the way you do. Neither will you, I said, and walked away shaking. I started seeing a therapist named Leon who had a talent for asking questions that felt like turning a locked doorknob. When did you first feel uneasy? She asked. The night I woke him at 3 a.m. because I thought I heard someone at the back door, I said. He calmed me down so quickly it felt rehearsed. What did you need then? She said. To be wrong, I said, and to be loved like I could be wrong safely. Claire and I made a rule. We would never talk about him alone at night. Daylight only. We met Saturday mornings at a booth that became a confessional. We traded documents the way kids once traded stickers. I told her about the dog I never met. She told me about the cabin he'd promised to build and the foundation he'd poured in lies. One morning she arrived with a shoebox, inside to flash drives and a stack of cards. Receipts, bank exports, travel itineraries. She'd wiped one of his old laptops before he could change the passwords. I thought I'd feel dirtier, she said, but this is just housekeeping. I plugged in a drive. There they were, calendars with color-coded blocks, Claire in blue, Julia in green, Tom in black for the days he belonged to no one and everyone. There were spreadsheets labeled gifts with columns for JNC and notes like repeat. So he would never buy us the same perfume twice. It was stunning in its devotion, grotesque in its equality. We brought the drives to the Dow. The young assistant prosecutor grinned grimly, the way mechanics grin at a seized engine they know how to break free. He built himself into a corner, she said. Thank you. My sister Ruth called to say she was coming over and bringing wine, and also scissors, in case we need to cut something symbolic. She landed on my couch like a hurricane with a license. He was always too good at being a guest, she said. Hosts put away chairs. Guests decide which room they'll occupy. What if I miss him? I asked. She poured. Missing is the body remembering what the mind knows better. Let it happen in waves. Then go to bed. Bills mounted. The mortgage looked at me with a new facial expression. I sold the yellow siding house to a couple who had the particular glow of first-time buyers. I packed our life into boxes that labeled themselves kitchen, bedroom, evidence, alchemy things that will become something else, detritus things that won't. Claire helped haul, and we learned the choreography of two women making space inside a story that had tried to make them furniture. On moving day, the dog, the one who chewed 3 couches, sat in the back seat like a person contemplating philosophy. He'd been mine more than ours anyway. He chose me in the divorce by sleeping on my shoes. The judge didn't argue. I rented an apartment that smelled faintly of lemon and other people's lives. It had a fire escape that wanted to be a balcony and a view of a tree that changed its mind about color every 10 days. The first night, I ate toast on the floor, watched a movie with no plot, and slept without listening for a key in a lock that meant two different things. Thomas pled not guilty, loudly and with the assistance of a press release. Somebody at a local site wrote a headline with the word bigamist and a photo of him that made him look like a magazine subscription. The comments were a country of their own, some cruel, some kind, some so thirsty for outrage they would have drunk the ocean. My inbox filled with messages from women who had seen versions of my life. One wrote, I was wife for. He's in prison now and I still miss the way he made Saturday mornings feel like a national holiday. Another, he only married one of us, but he promised the ceremony to all 3. Another, I think I'm dating your husband. He isn't, but the ache in her sentence made me reply anyway. When the trial started, Claire and I sat shoulder to shoulder behind the bar, 2 halves of a classroom demonstration. The state called witnesses, bank clerks, a clerk from the county office who remembered his laugh, a neighbor who had watched him move a grill from one patio to another like a migratory ritual. The defense did what defenses do, attacked process, tried to invent a consent we never gave. The prosecutor asked me to read aloud a text Thomas had sent on our anniversary while he was at Claire's. "I'm at work late but thinking of you so hard." I delivered it without shaking. It landed like gravel in a jar. On day 3, the prosecutor called Claire. She wore a dress that meant business and a jacket that meant weather. She told the story clean and without poetry. She did not cry. The defense asked if she had ever wanted a sister, as if we'd invented each other out of loneliness. She smiled like a blade. "I wanted a husband," she said. "I have a sister. She's sitting right there." People whispered. The judge banged. The transcript would say, "Murmurs, order, proceed." Verdict day tasted like copper. The jury took 4 hours and a sandwich break. Guilty on bigamy. Guilty on fraud. Not guilty on one tax count, because juries, like rivers, sometimes choose a path you didn't draw on the map. The judge sentenced him to 2 years and restitution. He looked for me as they led him away. I did not look back. I was busy reading a text from Ruth that said, "Dinner at 7. We're doing tacos, freedom food." After all the courtrooms, something inside me was fired when confronted with ordinary decisions. What color towels, what time to go to bed when no schedule is a trap. I learned to like silence that wasn't hiding anything. I relearned my laugh with new timing. Claire and I tried not talking for a while, as if distance would make us normal. It didn't. Normal had moved. We met again, at the same booth. She brought a photo album, not of him, of us. Program printouts with our names highlighted, articles we'd been quoted in as victims, a selfie from the day we signed victim impact statements where we look like college roommates on a bad day. "I don't want him to be the reason we know each other," she said. "But he is. Maybe he can be the reason we know ourselves differently," I said. "That's almost a gift, a stupid, expensive gift." We laughed. We ordered pie. We practiced being people whose lives are not defined by a man's talent for division. Months passed. I got a new job, still research, but for a nonprofit that helps people find heirs who aren't disasters. Irony introduced itself and asked to stay. I developed an eye for signatures that lie, a feel for paper that wants to confess. I dated once a man named Joel who used coasters and didn't perform his pain. When he asked what I wanted, I said, "A small life that doesn't ask to be spectacular," and he nodded like he'd been waiting to want that too. We kissed in a way that felt like choosing good lighting over a velvet curtain. Thomas wrote from prison. Handwritten letters addressed in the cursive of a boy who once got straight A's in penmanship. He wanted me to know he was journaling. He wanted me to know about the book club. He wanted me to believe in his reflection. I read the first letter like it might contain a map to a version of us that hadn't existed. I recycled the rest. He also wrote to Claire. She sent me a photo of her trash can with 4 envelopes stacked like a stubborn Jenga tower. We celebrated with muffins. When you survive a myth, you learn to party efficiently. I visited the old yellow house once, parked at the curb like a tourist. The new couple had painted the door a brave teal. On the porch, a woman watered a plant that looked like it knew it was loved. The dog barked once in the back seat, as if to remind me I had chosen a future that doesn't involve creeping shrubs of memory. On the anniversary of the verdict, Claire and I hosted a small gathering at the cafe. We called it Parallel No More. A few women from my inbox came. We told our stories without naming him, like inviting the characters but not the author. A young woman at the end of the table said, "How do you know it won't happen again?" We didn't lie. We said, "We don't." Then we added, "But we know we survived, and we know what the floor feels like when it holds." Late that night, as rain stitched the streetlights into something softer, I opened the file folder where I'd kept the original courthouse copy of the other marriage certificate. I considered burning it in a bowl the way Emily in some other story might have done. Instead, I slid it behind the lease for my apartment. Not because I needed the reminder of harm, but because I wanted to remember who did the harm and who did the living. A month later, a glitch in the county system auto-mailed a tax notice to Thomas and Claire Martin. I laughed so hard I scared the dog. I forwarded to Claire with the caption, "Apparently the server wants another season." She replied, "Let's cancel the show." The first time Joel left a toothbrush at my place, he asked, "Do you want this here?" I thought of keys in drawers, of phones with other lives, of signatures that mean and signatures that perform. I said, "I want you to want to ask." Then I cleared a spot next to the toothpaste and put the toothbrush there like a small, dignified flag. Some nights I still dream in doubles to kitchens, to Christmases, to wives learning they were arithmetic. In the dream, I am always holding the certificate with the blue ribbon and the wrong bride. I am always walking toward a courthouse that never quite resolves. When I wake, I count single things: one dog, one coffee mug, one window, one rain. It helps. Here's what I have learned. Betrayal does not end when the liar is caught. It ends when you stop rehearsing the scene without them. It ends when you forgive your past self for believing the script. It ends when you decide the story is not what he did, the story is what you built after. It ends, or it becomes something else, call it authorship. If you need a tidy moral, I don't have one. I have tacos on verdict night and Teodors and women who sit shoulder to shoulder at a booth and pass each other flash drives like torches. I have a dog who trusts my shoes. I have a toothbrush that asks permission. I have a certificate that once cracked me open and now lives in a folder labeled archive, not altar. And I have one last question for you, because stories like this are call and response. What would you have wanted me to do the day I found the second marriage certificate? Confront immediately with the half-truths I had? Or wait, gather everything, and risk living in a lie a little longer for the whole truth? In your life, which has cost you more, patience or speed?